character modeling in Seneferu pipeline. As we mentioned before, there are several types of processes for the modeling. Of course, I will not talk about the modeling itself, but I'm going to talk about the different types and processes of modeling for characters in Seneferu pipeline. And as you know, you can follow whatever workflow you want. But if you are using the exact workflow and pipeline that ships with Seneferu, then it's good to know the differences between the processes that Seneferu has regarding to the character modeling. As we mentioned before, the model process is for the environment modeling. Model CHR is to tell Seneferu that this is a character model. Actually, not to tell Seneferu. Seneferu already knows, but it's for telling you that this is a different type of processes, so you can manage your team, so you can tell which task can or which task type can go to which user. I will not go in a lot of details about the task assignment and these things here, but I just want to tell the different types of modeling. You have the model CHR for the character modeling, you have garment for a single-sided garment for the cloth simulation, and you have cloth model process, which is the final cloth model that goes for rendering, which is the cloth model with highly detailed texture and proper topology that will be used for the final character rendering. So let's start by taking an example here. Let's say that we are going to work in the on the garment process for one of our characters here. First of all, you set your task to in progress, then Control-click load dependencies. This will load the character for you. Then you will start doing the garment either using whatever the clothes plugin you are using, or you are using enclothe in Maya, or you are using Qualot, or whatever the plugin is. Or you can, for example, create the make the garment in something like Marvelous and load it in here, because at the end you will have to publish the garment from Maya. I did one that, let's say that this is it, and you will notice that I have here one single-sided mesh, which is the simulation, garment, and I have the extruded one here, which is the final one that will go for rendering. Actually, this one is optional for the garment, so you can just delete it if you don't want it, or you can keep it. It's up to you, because actually the extruded one will be done in the cloth model process, not in the garment process. If it's there, then it will help the modeler who's going to do the cloth model, but if it's not there, then you can create it later. So I will keep it for now. I will keep the extruded one, but I will keep it hidden, and I will leave only the one that is used for the simulation, which is the actual one that is needed from the garment process visible, and I will create the asset locator, and I will publish this by clicking on the publish button, which will publish the final asset. I will not publish it again because I already have one here. So when you publish this, task will automatically go to art review or review, depending on if it was approved before or not. Let's say that it will go to art review, so I will art approve it. or let's assume that the art department have reviewed it and approved it. And let's say that it's as expected. Then when we find that everything is fine, I will give it the final approval. So now when we publish the garment and the garment is approved, we will find that the closed model task of the character is now ready to start. First thing we will do is to set it to in progress, then load dependencies, which will load all the dependencies needed for doing your task and will make your task ready to start. So now you will notice that the garment has the objects that we published before. I will assume for now that this object does not really exist and only this object is there. So I will assume that this object was never been there, which is the extruded one. So usually the garment, especially if it's coming from, for example, if you want to make it in Marvelous Designer or something, then you will be having single-sided mesh, and that was the purpose of having a garment task from the beginning. If you are having an extruded, ready to render and ready to simulate tasks, then you don't have, or you don't have to have a garment task. And in the meanwhile, if you already have the extruded version that is ready for rendering, then you don't need the closed model itself. So the garment can just go to the texturing and rendering, and you can just delete the closed model task. To make this clear, let's make it once together. Let's assume that this object is not there as we said. Then what we are going to do is to extrude this, and of course I'll extrude in minus or in negative value. The reason why I'm doing this, because that the closed model is going to be used in the closed setup, and in the closed setup what the closed TD is going to do is that he will have a collision offset between the surface and the body and between the different closed layers. So when we extrude in negative value, the second layer of the closed will go towards the lower layer and will fill the gap or the collision offset as expected. So that's what we have to do. So but of course we will need to reverse the normals in this case, and we will set it to face, and I'm not sure if this is the best way to do it. Then yeah, so now we have this done, and let's assume that we already created the proper UVs for it. Then we are now ready to publish. I will create asset locator, but of course remember that before you can publish, I will just make a hack here to assume that this is not there again. I'm expecting that the final closed model to be just the name of the object, and we want to cache tag it so we can tell the system that we want to cache this out as the closed or as the target object that we have created during this session. Don't get yourself confused about the caching anyway, but we should either take it out of the dependency locator, or we should tag it to tell the system that we are considering recaching this object because we made additional work on it during the publish. So just without confusing yourself, the new object that you created and you needed, or the object of interest, needs to be cached. So it needs to be tagged for caching. Now let's publish. Okay, so now when this is done, let's now check what we have published. You will notice that we now have the object that we cached or that we tagged to be the closed model object. Of course, if there are several objects, you will cache tag the multiple extruded objects that you created. Let's actually take better screenshot. So that's it. Now let's see another example where we have actually, let's approve this first. And let's see another example where we don't need to have, or when we don't need to have closed model task. For example, if we load dependencies for this guy here, then as mentioned before, if the character is already having the proper closed sim object and the proper renderable closed object that has the needed extrude, in cases if you need extrude for the cloth actually, then in that case, as long as all the needed models are there in the garment asset itself, then you don't need the closed model task. In that case, you will have to inform the asset manager to delete this task. Then, according to that, the garment will automatically go to the closed texture by passing the closed model task that you have deleted. But remember that this has to be deleted, otherwise the system will always assume that this task is not done and will always keep the closed texture task as not ready to start because this is not finished. So it's really important that you delete the task if you don't need it, in case if the garment is already having the models that you have to do.